Hey guys, and welcome back to Tennis 360, the newest podcast, QualityShot Tennis. It's the third episode. My name's Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
Welcome back. This is the podcast where we talk all things tennis. So the U.S. Open just happened. It was Novak Djokovic and Coco Gauff getting the win, respectively. Kind of an older champion, guy who's been around the block a lot of times. Also, the youth getting it done as well. Yeah, let's talk about the finals. Djokovic beating Medvedev and Gauff beating Sabalenka. Well, first of all, Coco Gauff has been playing absolutely inspired tennis all summer, just hitting that forehand better and better, and just all across the board, just really took control with a great comeback versus Sabalenka. What'd you think of that, of her run?
Yeah, absolutely. I think she demonstrated her full skill set over the summer, reaching kind of the potential of what we've been seeing from her game for the last 4 years or so. Obviously, making that coaching change at the beginning of the summer after her Wimbledon first round loss, had a lot of time to think, reflect, recoup, and obviously started her new partnership with Brad Gilbert, who's had phenomenal success with other American athletes in the past, turning them around pretty quickly to pick up titles. Obviously, winning a 500, then a Masters, then a Grand Slam is a very quick level of progression. But I think we always knew that Gauff's athleticism was there to do that. But as you mentioned, the turnaround on the forehand is really what's impressed me the most. And her ability to stay composed there in that final, given that she was really blown off the court by Sabalenka's power in the first set.
Yeah, totally. I think, well, first of all, Brad Gilbert has a crazy record on him, where it's like he started coaching Agassi, and then Agassi won the U.S. Open. Then he started coaching, I believe, Roddick, and he won the U.S. Open. Now Coco Gauff, but I mean, all credits to Gauff. I think I have a stat. I think she hit 33 winners. Sabalenka hit 26 winners in that match, which is like Sabalenka is known for like hitting lots of winners all across the court, that really surprised me. And I think that shows that Gauff's really playing a very aggressive style. I mean, we knew it with the backhand. She's had one of the better backhands on the tour, hitting it huge with the two-hander, but the forehand's really improved to a really great place. And she was even serving big. She had the biggest serve of that match too, is another stat. She had a bigger serve than Sabalenka. So very impressive all across the board. Gauff getting her first 500, then a first 1000, and then a first Grand Slam. So really impressive.
Yeah, especially under those circumstances too. You'd think, coming into a home Grand Slam, obviously leading the head-to-head with Sabalenka 3-2 coming into that match as well. The crowd was really backing her to win, and in that first set, after she was kind of blown off the court, it sounded like some of the wind was taken out of the sails of the crowd, and she easily, could have gone away in the second, but we also know how Sabalenka is, and she can get tight, she can get nervous, and she also only plays one style of tennis. And it seemed like once Gauff was figuring out, okay, I need depth, I think she said she started aiming for the baseline instead of just inside of the baseline, that sort of giving her the depth she needed to trouble Sabalenka. And Sabalenka's response was, okay, I'm just going to hit it harder. And I think that was not the right strategy or right tactic against Gauff, who was starting to read the pace well, was starting to read the balls well. She was just hitting it harder down the middle. She wasn't trying to find angles. And with Gauff being as good of a mover and also as good at anticipation as she is, it just wasn't going to be the recipe for success in that second and third set for Sabalenka. And I thought that Gauff just did a magnificent job of sticking to the game plan, playing consistent tennis, and letting Sabalenka beat herself, essentially. Even though she brought that many winners to the table, I think she just asked the question of Sabalenka on so many occasions, like hit one more ball, and she just couldn't deliver on that front. So I thought it was a really good strategy, good tactic, and really composed execution.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I think as much as the aggression, the winners was a big thing. I think the defense and letting Sabalenka kind of defeat herself in some ways was kind of the big plan. And I think in some ways that is dictating if you can figure out a way to make your opponent hit errors. Sometimes unforced errors really are more forced by what your opponent is doing, the amazing defense that they're bringing. You're really asking your opponent to go for a lot, especially a player like Sabalenka, who really just completely destroys the forehands, and they're either going in or they're going out, and sometimes a lot of them can start going out. So I think that was a great strategy from Gauff for sure.
But also an awesome run from Sabalenka, you know, an impressive year for her, first woman to get to all the semis or better of the slam since 2016 when Serena did it. She has had a fantastic year and such a significant turnaround from 2021-2022 season, where we were really asking a lot of questions of her if she was able to, you know, step up big time. Of course, she has had a couple disappointing losses from winning positions, but I think just the fight that she even showed in that semi against Madison Keys, coming back from being bageled in the first set, you know, old Sabalenka really would have gone away in that situation. And so, you know, kudos to her on picking up the #1 ranking this week. She deserves it. She's really been at the business end of all of the tournaments this year. She showed us what type of improvement she can make. And, you know, that sort of mental resilience and fortitude that's improving match by match as we watch her. So she'll learn a lot from this final. She also has a lot to celebrate from the year, but just coming into the tournament, one kind of felt like this might be Gauff's time, Gauff's moment. And when Swiatek and Rybakina dropped out earlier in early rounds, I think that really opened up Gauff's opportunities, and she did away with Ostapenko with no problems, and you know, obviously did well against Mukova in the final in Cincinnati, and did well here as well in the semifinal. So I think was helped a little bit by those early losses, but you know, by no means did she face easy opponents, and she didn't miss a beat at that stage of a Grand Slam either. So super impressive run from both of those women.
Yeah, totally. Sabalenka 4 major semifinals this year. 2 of them lost in very close semifinals. You could even say epic semifinals against Ons Jabeur and against Mukova as well. It was I think kudos to Sabalenka. As soon as I heard, I mean, it would almost be a different story if Swiatek also got to the final of the US Open or maybe won the US Open, but the fact she lost in the 4th round, Sabalenka has been so consistent all year. I felt like it was deserved, and at her best, her peak game is really, really incredible to watch. And now that she's figured out the serve this year, I mean, that's really unlocked a really great game from her. She's really able to do a lot on the +1 and really be able to dictate at her best. So that's really impressive from Sabalenka. And then, of course, Coco, it did feel like her time. I mean, she had the momentum going in. I wanted to rank her #1 or #2 on the power rankings for like the first week that we did it, but I just held myself back because I was like, okay, well, let's see. She's got Swiatek in the US Open. It's hard to beat her twice in a row. She's got also Rybakina in there. She's got a lot of great players in the mix who have been playing really good ball. So I was just like, okay, I hope that Gauff proves to the tennis world that she can do it at a major as well. And the fact that it is the reality is very good to see for a player who came out so young against Venus at Wimbledon at 15 years old. And now 4 years later as a teenager, getting the youth all the way through the line. It's really great to see it already.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, she's got the athleticism and hopefully the longevity now to push on, and feel like she is really a part of the mix that can go on and win more titles. I think it's a very interesting time for the number of active players who have Grand Slam titles, and also the number of who just have one. So, you know, who's going to come out of this generation, this era, as the kind of leading names that have picked up multiple slams on the women's side. And obviously Swiatek's leading that at the moment, but we know that Osaka's coming back next year. She's another one that has multiple to her name. So we have a few now that are inside the top 10 with just one Grand Slam. So which of these names is going to push on to win a few more? And I think with Brad Gilbert by her side, she has the head on her shoulders, the game and the athleticism to keep adapting and reinventing herself to be a multiple Grand Slam champion.
Yeah. And the mentality, I think, I mean, I knew this for a long time. The mentality she brings is amazing. This kind of like fearlessness, and she just won't give up at any point. I mean, in a match, but also in her career at people are saying she can't do it with the forehand. She wins a 500 for her first time. Then 1,000, 2,000 people say can't beat Iga Swiatek. She
Right.
beats Iga Swiatek, and it's just that's I think one of the things that most impresses me about Gauff. So.
Yeah.
And yeah, with Brad Gilbert on her side, and then also just all the momentum she has right now, I hope she keeps it going because her game is only getting better and better. And the women's side in general is really fun to watch. So many good names there. And Wozniacki back as well at this tournament. We can talk about some of the other big things that happened at the tournament. For the women's side, Wozniacki came back against Kvitova. It looked like we were watching a match straight out of 2017. It's like it was amazing. Wozniacki was hitting winners so precise, but also the defense, of course, but she wasn't really pushing the ball at her best. Very defense to offense, very kind of hitting lines precise, breaking the other opponent down, but kind of in a Medvedev-esque way, just kind of from the back of the court, running everything down. And but I mean, she's been doing it forever, and it's good to see her finally back.
Yeah, it's great to see her back. Impressive to be at that level after 3 years and 2 kids. And it doesn't seem like she had that much of a preseason kind of coming into the US Open. So super impressed by her ability to play at this level, to beat somebody who's inside the top 20 and has had a good season in Kvitova. And hopefully I think she's not playing any more tournaments the rest of this year. Hopefully she'll kind of go away, work on things, have a good off season, and be another name that's kind of in the mix of those returning mothers that could upset the draw in the tournaments leading up to the Australian Open.
I think so. I hope that she comes back. I hope, like you mentioned, Naomi Osaka, I hope she's back. What a great player she was for the sport. And and she'll be back. But it's incredible. Wozniacki, after having, I believe, 2 kids and just great. Yeah, that's crazy for her to be back. Yeah.
I think it's also worth talking about Ostapenko beating Swiatek again, leading that head-to-head now 5-0. I think she has exposed a weakness in the Swiatek game of, not being so happy at dealing with out-and-out power hitters. And it's interesting because obviously Sabalenka and Rybakina are more of that power hitter profile, but I think Ostapenko edges it slightly in the kind of, all out or nothing mentality. And somehow she seems to bring the all out game when she plays Swiatek, and she rushes her and it stresses her out. And you can tell that matchup now is really playing on the mind of Swiatek. She's going to start wondering, what she's going to do when she sees the Ostapenko name in her side of the draw. And to see Ostapenko then in the next match get completely dismantled by Gauff, I think was really interesting and just shows, again, the athleticism of Gauff being able to, chase down those power hitting shots and just be patient. Not that, Swiatek's not a great mover. She's a great athlete. I just think it's a very interesting exposure of weakness in the Swiatek game, and something for kind of folks to look out for when playing her in the future.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And she has struggled. I don't know if they're all as much all out power, but against Rybakina and Sabalenka as well this year. I mean, Rybakina beating her at the Australian Open, Sabalenka beating her in Madrid, and Rybakina beating her in Rome as well, actually. There's I think there's something to say about that, about the all out power. And when Ostapenko is at her best, it's really crazy to watch, which it makes it crazier that Coco beat her 6-2, 6-0. I think after Coco did that, everybody's like, she might win the US Open. It's like she's really somebody to watch here. And but yeah, Ostapenko is crazy. Another thing I would mention is Swiatek 4th round. She's 7-7 in 4th rounds now, and after 4th round quarterfinals and onwards, I think she's like 12-4 or something. It was like really kind of a weird disconnect. Yeah. I don't know exactly what that is. It's kind of like a Sabalenka semifinals number or something. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be fair to say that Swiatek hasn't had a good season. She has, picked up the title at Roland Garros, had a much better run at Wimbledon this year than she has in the past. But, it was inevitable that people were going to be coming after her after the season that she had last year, taking over the number 1 spots, picking up multiple Grand Slam titles. And, that kind of fear factor after a little while begins to wear off. The level of the players around her, increased and improved. And, there's more film and more examples of her losing for players to watch and learn from. And so, it was always going to be hard for Swiatek to back up the type of season that she had last year. And you could tell that maybe the pressure of retaining the number one ranking, having to defend her title at the US Open, it seemed like it was kind of eating her alive. And I'm not going to lie, watching her, it almost looked like she wasn't having a good time. It kind of reminded me of some of the press conferences that Osaka had before she took a step back, where she was saying, like, I don't feel happy when I win, I just feel relieved. And that was almost the position that I felt like Swiatek was in. And I thought what Gauff said after she won was super interesting, where she said previously she would have felt relief, but now that she's changed her mentality, she really felt joy. And I feel like some of the joy for Swiatek maybe was wavering under the, incredible pressure that she puts herself under to be perfect. And so I hope that Swiatek can kind of go away a little bit, really, connect and find the love of the game, and not be too worried about, the number next to her name, and just stay focused on the great tennis that she can play, and hopefully, enjoy it a little more than what it seems like she is at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And piggybacking off of what you said about Swiatek not really caring about that number next to her name, Sabalenka, when asked what are your thoughts on getting the world number one ranking, and what changed this year that allowed you to step up, and she said, I stopped caring about the number next to my name, and I focused on what I needed to do. And I think that speaks a lot about it, and not just focusing on what you need to do, but focusing, I think, on the joy that ultimately is what I think keeps a lot of players playing, or ultimately what a big takeaway of playing should be, because I think at the end of the day, it is a game, and there are two sides of it. First of all, if you're not happy, you're probably not going to be winning all that often. And then also, in general, you're playing a stadium, thousands of people, and it should be a great opportunity to show your skills, and what should be a lot of fun for the fans, for the players, for everybody all around. And if you're not happy, and if you're just playing from a stressful place, which high level tennis can be absolutely as well, then it's going to be difficult. But I think that finding that joy again is a big thing for every athlete. And I agree. I think Swiatek wasn't really looking her happiest against Ostapenko, probably because she was down 0-4 in the head-to-head as well, and was about to go be 5-0, I think. Yeah. But also because I don't know, there's something mental inside of her. And she was speaking about after a press conference about comments on social media, and her being afraid to lose and stuff like that. Right. And I think that could be a part of it for sure.
Yeah. And talking about the joy, I think it's also, worth looping Rybakina into that conversation as well. I think she's had a tough year following that Wimbledon title last year. Obviously got to the final in Australia, was ill at the French Open, fell, wasn't able to, get things done at Wimbledon this year, and picked up maybe a little bit of a shoulder injury in the warm-up tournaments, had a couple late nights in Toronto or in Montreal, and, had an early-ish exit here. So I think she's going to be a little disappointed with her Grand Slam performances this year, given kind of all of the conversation and hype. Obviously, she wasn't well at the French. She didn't seem 100% well at Wimbledon either, and she didn't seem 100% healthy here at the US Open. So hard to know how much of that was down to health and fitness over, kind of her game style. But she's not been as feared in the later half of this season as maybe she was, following the Australian Open and Indian Wells title, that she was kind of exhibiting, especially in the lead up to the French. She was looking very dangerous, and things have kind of come apart since then. So I'm kind of interested to see how Rybakina is going to regroup towards the end of this year and going into next year.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, in fact, it was about after French Open going into Wimbledon, where I myself was kind of curious, like, Sabalenka's playing a run for the number one. Maybe Rybakina can as well, because she had won Rome. She made the final of both tournaments in the Sunshine Double, winning Indian Wells, beating Sabalenka in the final. She won Australian Open, also beating Sabalenka in the final. And there's just been, I don't know, since then, I think she has had health concerns. At Wimbledon, she lost to Jabeur, who was playing fantastic with a comeback there against both Rybakina and Sabalenka. So Jabeur was tough to beat, but I think at the same time, Rybakina isn't going to be happy with the quarterfinal loss where she won last year. And I think, I think overall that Rybakina at her best, to me, how cleanly she hits the ball, she's a very skilled player to me, and I hope that she comes back to her best, because she's a lot of fun to watch when she's at her best. She belongs in that big three conversation.
With Rybakina as well, what I think is kind of interesting is she's talked about how, she only really pursued professional tennis at the age of like 17, which is definitely late in the game for tennis players. And her dynamic with her coach is also very interesting. Her coach is extremely vocal throughout the whole match and really kind of tells her what to do point to point. Obviously, with coaching being legal now, it's interesting to see different players have different relationships with their coaching boxes. We saw a little bit of discussion around this with Alcaraz as well, with Juan Carlos being pretty vocal. But I wonder if at some moments Rybakina is still kind of, being 24 years old, like learning the game in a sense from a strategic perspective, when players, are a little bit tricky to beat, being able to figure out that puzzle and break down matches on her own, and playing on her instincts and her understanding of the game, rather than, needing that kind of constant input from her coach. It's something that, we're never going to know the answer to, but I'm just kind of curious if, her being a little later to the game of tennis, has maybe in some moments made figuring out that puzzle a little bit more difficult for her. And, she needs to learn to problem solve, in my opinion, a little more independently in some of those trickier matches like she had against Kirstea.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think also people have had concerns about the negative kind of affirmations that the coach has and kind of reactions to her. And I've seen that before in the ball. I was like, that's not something I'd like to see the coach have on the side while I'm playing. I think that you do make a good point that I think that she the players, as good as now that you have that extra coaching being available, still maybe you would want to figure it out on your own, because ultimately tennis is a game about being in the right mental space and about kind of keying in on the right strategies on your own. If you let too much outside influence get into you, that you can really mess up your own rhythm and kind of mess up your own kind of your own lines of thinking and kind of patterns that you've created in your own head. I think if you give in too much output, your input becomes a little bit messy. It's always hard to say when you're not a player, but I do wonder if that is a problem for Rybakina as well.
Yeah.
And
lastly, to mention on the WTA side before we get into ATP, I think it's worth we'll obviously talk about keys and the power ranking, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Zhang Wang. I thought she has shown that her new coaching relationship with Wim Fissett, who's also worked with multiple slam winners, is starting to come good. She had some of the fastest serves, and she was leading up there with the top players in terms of the ace leaderboard as well. And I know that match against Jabeur was a little bit under the weather, but I was there in person for that match, and my goodness, does that girl hit with power. And she can also really, really move. So I think that, she's young as well. She has a good coach in her camp now. I think she's going to be somebody that will push on in 2023 and will continue to develop a number of weapons in her game that will make her a big threat to those top players and very quickly be a name that's in contention for a top 10 position, because I was really impressed by her tennis this last 2 weeks.
I watched in full her match against Ons Jabeur, and that was really like top 5, top 10 level at least. Top 10 at least, maybe top 5. It was really incredible. She was blowing the player blowing Ons off the court, and it's just the kind of onslaught of winners, but also like the talent that she has. I really think she has one of the most how would you say it? I think she has a great read on the game, and I think she's very, very skilled and very quick as well. Very good on the defense. So yeah, I think all around, as long as she can improve the consistency and making it happen, kind of match in, match out, set in, set out, and also improving on her kind of variety. But I think as that all mixes in, I think she's going to be absolutely a threat. I've been excited about her for a little bit now, and I think anybody who watches her play can really see the clear talent and kind of just power, pure power that she can bring to the court.
Yeah, agree that variety is going to kind of be the next layer she needs to add on. But I think she definitely has the skill set there. And, where the power players on the women's tour are an increasing number. And she's definitely going to be someone that's hard to deal with, especially on the hard court. So look out for her name in the next couple of months, because I think she will shoot up the rankings very quickly.
Yeah. On her day, she can beat anybody, I think, in the game.
Yeah.
And then on the men's side, we had Novak Djokovic taking out Daniil Medvedev in straight sets, taking his 24th major, which extended the slam lead on the men's side. Listen, it was like a thriller second set. The first and third sets were pretty straightforward. The second set was an absolute battle, but it was Djokovic who got the win at the end of the day. And listen, he came out, he didn't play like his spectacular best, I felt, in that first set, but he was hitting that forehand big. And I feel like Daniil didn't really bring out the same level that I brought against Alcaraz in the semifinal. What did you think about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, Djokovic being the oldest man to win the US Open, I think, testament to that guy's longevity in his career, his ability to reinvent himself, as he said in the press conference, year on year, find new motivation, find ways to improve his game, and finding new weapons. I think that was all on display during that final. And ultimately, that second set really did decide things. It's also when Medvedev did raise his level. He, came out the gates, dropped his first service game. That kind of wrote off that first set. He wasn't playing that same level against Alcaraz. Then he did up that level in the second set. I feel like he did everything right to win that set. And so often with Djokovic, you can do everything right, and it's a matter of 2 or 3 points here and there. And if you don't make the right choices, you're going to lose. And, Medvedev had the opportunity to win that set with a passing shot down the line or a lob, and he made the wrong choice. And that happens in tennis, and that's painful. Yeah. But I think it's also testament to the fact that Djokovic makes you ask questions of yourself, makes you make difficult decisions, difficult choices, and ultimately was able to adapt his own game to hang with Medvedev. I think if we had watched or shown this tape of Djokovic to Djokovic from 10 years ago, he would have been like, who is that player? Djokovic used to be the guy that would always beat you from the back of the court, from the baseline. He wouldn't be afraid about hanging in 15 plus shot rallies. You wouldn't see him hunched over, falling over, looking drunk at times, as he was in the second set, because Medvedev was making things really physical. And surprisingly, it almost looked like Medvedev was the fitter of the two, per se. And so for Djokovic to recognize, hey, I am not in a 25-year-old's body, I'm in a 36-year-old's body, I need to adjust my game, and I'm not going to get stuck in these 15-20 shot rallies, especially when I'm serving. And he took that into his own hands and deployed a serve and volley tactic with absolute perfection. And Medvedev remained stubborn, didn't want to move up on the return of serve, just couldn't do anything with the Djokovic serve, which I think is an underrated weapon. Couldn't ask the right questions of Djokovic when he was coming into the net on the serve and volley strategy, and ultimately just kind of had no answer to that tactic. And if you're going to do what Medvedev does and standing that far back on the return, you leave yourself exposed to that tactic, and he didn't have an answer for it today. And so, kudos to Djokovic, as I said at the beginning, for continuing to reinvent his game and improve his skill sets in a way that, not many players can do at that later stage of their career.
Yeah, I'd agree with pretty much everything you said. I don't have much to add on. I would say the big thing is that Medvedev needed an absolutely amazing serving performance. He really didn't get it in the final. In the final that I played in 2021, he had over 80% first serve percentage. And this final, it wasn't even close. I mean, I think he was scoring just over 60%. I mean, it wasn't what he wanted at all. In that first set, it was even lower. And I think that was a big thing. I mean, one of the big reasons that Medvedev had such great success, let's say, against Alcaraz on the quick courts was how fast the U.S. Open hard courts play. He needs the serve to be in effect, and Medvedev is a defensive player, but he needs the fast courts to be working so that his defense can at least be effective, his defense to offense game to be working from way behind the court for there to be constant depth. He really didn't switch up his strategy against Alcaraz. He really stayed back, but the returns that he was having were really effective and scoring deep through the court. And even Alcaraz said, I really wasn't expecting that kind of pace from Medvedev. And in that Indian Wells final, not only were the courts slow, but Medvedev also just didn't bring his best. Alcaraz played a perfect final, but Medvedev was not even in the ballpark of what he usually brings. So I think that that semifinal, Medvedev really didn't switch it up, but that it just showed why the fast courts do so much for him, and also the serve. In this final, Djokovic just played absolutely perfect. He tried to stay away from the long rallies. He played aggressive with the forehand, and the fast serves from Medvedev really weren't coming very much. So I think that Djokovic just knew exactly what he needed to do, had the right game plan, stuck to it. And I think that second set, I think Djokovic maybe could have come back even if he lost that second set, but the momentum would have been really big with Medvedev either way. And I think that that was a really big second set. And I think that backhand down the line, what should have been a backhand down the line on set point, is going to haunt Daniil. But yeah, it was an interesting final. What do you think of the Medvedev Alcaraz semifinal? I thought that one was like even better than the final. I thought that was an electric semifinal between the two completely opposite game styles, just going head to head.
Oh, absolutely. That to me was the better match. The more interesting match. It was, more rhythm changes, and ultimately, both players had a little bit more of an opportunity. I think we all kind of knew that after that second set in the final, the wind was going to be out the sails. That would have just been too big of a mountain for Medvedev to climb and try and come back from. I think Alcaraz, to me, looked ever so slightly flat in that semifinal. I don't want to use the word complacent because I don't think that that's it, but I think he needs to maybe learn to deal with the pressure of being number one, being a defending champion, being in a situation where the whole week long people are saying you're going to face Djokovic, and kind of learn to not have one eye ahead of the next match that you're playing. And that's kind of how it felt like he might have come into that match. Maybe not anticipating the danger that Medvedev can bring, having beaten him with relative ease in their last few meetings. And I think, Medvedev is an extremely intelligent guy. He said it right. He needed to be able to play 11 out of 10 on that day. He did. And to exceed your, usual levels of play on multiple occasions or multiple matches in a row is what makes a difference between someone who's a 24-time Grand Slam champion and a one-time Grand Slam champion. And I think Medvedev played the perfect match against Alcaraz. Stuck to the game plan, as you say, served well, returned well, movement was fantastic, and he just wasn't allowing himself to be hit through. And I thought what was particularly impressive actually was his movement up to the drop shot, and not only getting there, but actually doing something with it. Alcaraz is so good at threatening the drop shot and making players really not know what to do with themselves in those types of situations, especially off of the kind of +1 return of serve. And so Medvedev made Alcaraz confused and puzzled, and you could tell he just didn't really know what to do. That's why he was asking so many questions of his coaching box. And I think that just exposes a little bit of the inexperience of Alcaraz at this stage, and the first time that he's being asked to defend a Grand Slam title. And the last person to defend that US Open title is Roger Federer. We've had, I think, more than 8 years of changing winners on the men's side, which is actually really unusual.
15, 2008.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
We always see repeat winners on the men's side. Yeah. So to have that much,
it's the longest ever
consistency on the US Open Slam of all places.
Yeah,
it's
crazy. It's crazy.
It's something to think about, and it shows that that's one of the slams that's the hardest to defend. And so kudos to him for getting to the semis. He had a great run at it, and I don't think he let himself down by any means, but maybe that pressure, that last little ask was a little bit too much, and Medvedev played out of his mind on the day.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and I think that I really liked Medvedev just staying back, even though it really wasn't even working all the time at the start of the match. Alcaraz was serving and volleying, had great success. Every time he'd get a volley, he'd make a winner off it. Not only would he make it in, but he would make a winner off of it. And it was just like Medvedev was like, "No, I'm staying back anyway," and he got more and more success as the match went on. I felt like there was a bit of a reversal where I felt like Alcaraz was really the more kind of started staying, not finding his way to the baseline where he likes to play.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of, it felt like a little bit out of position a lot of the time. And I
Yeah.
felt like finding his way deep behind the baseline, I felt like that's not how Alcaraz wants to play at all. I felt like that was really impressive from Medvedev to have that constant depth to push Alcaraz behind the baseline. I felt like a big thing as well was Medvedev's great anticipation that semifinal. I think that was a huge thing, and you have to have crazy anticipation against Alcaraz. I felt like every time Alcaraz was hitting a shot, Medvedev would find exactly where he was going to hit it and get there and be have a great next shot to hit pretty precise angle. So I felt like that was impressive from side Medvedev. But either way, that was a very fun semifinal between after Wimbledon 6-3, 6-3, 6-3 for Alcaraz, Indian Wells final for Medi to get it done on what he really considers a hard court. I think was really fun. I think that two very creative, inventive, maybe unorthodox players going head to head, but completely different game styles. And always feels a bit like a science experiment, to be honest. Just like you don't know how these two game styles are going to mesh with each other because they're so different. That semifinal was fun. The final was crazy second set. Novak still finding a way through a crazy physical battle and just on the ground like he was in 2012 Australia versus Rafa. 11 years later, still finds a way over one of the best players in the world. And
I bet he regrets that Wimbledon loss now because who knows what would have happened. But ultimately, extremely dominant season in the slams. It's what he's preparing to peak for is the slams. And I hate to say it, but it doesn't look like there's any signs of him slowing down. And, it's really going to be a question of who on the men's side in that, contending group is going to take a step up and up that level to really be able to challenge him on a consistent basis and meet him in these finals and beat him there. And, Alcaraz is one of the names, but who else is it going to be? And I really hope we see some leveling up in terms of the rest of the field inside the top 10 on the men's side, because it feels like Djokovic and Alcaraz, for the most part, Medvedev maybe a little bit, are kind of a cut above the rest. And, what names are going to be in the mix that can come in here and actually, be able to put a string of 7 matches together with that, including, beating an Alcaraz, a Medvedev, and a Djokovic on the way. And I'm looking at those top 10 players and I'm got question marks over who that really could be.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we'll get to, we have a weekly power ranking segment as well that we do. We'll get to that. I was having trouble making my top 10 past the top 3, 4, 5 players. It was because Tsitsipas, Rune, Ruud, all of them lost early at the US Open. Yeah. And there's a lot of, I don't know. It's hard to say who's really that could be. Zverev is looking better in form. He could be the guy that climbs up and starts testing out players. He tested Djokovic in Cincinnati. Yeah.
But Zverev isn't, necessarily a new name. I think before their injury, he was peaking and asking the right questions and kind of, solidifying his name as a contender. Whether he can go all the way is another question. But I think, him beating Sinner in the way that he did in the round of 16, I think not that it, raises major questions over Sinner, but, again, another painful 5-set loss for him. A guy that he is ranked higher than. Obviously, Zverev is a good opponent that's on a comeback. But I think most disappointingly for me were the losses of Tsitsipas, Rune, and Ruud. I think Rune was carrying some sort of injury from the summer because he did have a reasonable run at Wimbledon, and his back was bothering him. He should have kept his mouth shut on the court's assignments, but Tsitsipas and Ruud in particular, both Grand Slam finalists, multiple-time Grand Slam finalists. Tsitsipas historically having a really hard time for some reason at the US Open. Dominic Stricker, somebody who came through qualifying, who seemed to deal with the heat better than Tsitsipas did, which was just bizarre. And, Ruud not having any answers to his Chinese compatriot, and just both of them I watched both of these matches in person. They looked so flat and they looked so depleted of confidence. And I don't know what it's going to take for them, but I look at those two names and I just sort of think like, I have very little, I hate to say it, very little faith that either of those two you know, can get it done with Djokovic being around. It'll be a different question once he's retired. But, you know, then one really thinks like, okay, if they couldn't do it with Djokovic on tour, you know, what does that really say about their level and the level of men's tennis with and without Djokovic?
Yeah, I think definitely fair all around. There's some disappointment. I think though the level that Djokovic brings is so high, even out there. I mean, I've seen people saying things like Djokovic is 36, the men's game. The fact that he's won these majors is a question to the men's game. I personally don't see it like that. I think Djokovic is such a one in a generation player, and he's still playing such a high level. That's kind of remarkable at 36. I mean, we see how good Alcaraz is playing, and this level of Djokovic is beating Alcaraz in big tournaments. So I think I don't have questions about that, but I do have questions about the level of the top 10 because their inconsistency. They're not just losing to Djokovic, they're losing to a guy like Zhang in the second round, is Casper Ruud, guy like Stricker in the second round, who, by the way, I really like Stricker, very good all-court player, young player, but I mean, Tsitsipas should not be losing in the second round to players like that. Rune losing to Garbes Baena, who's very good on clay courts, but on hard courts, Holger Rune should not be losing matches like that. And I think it was a disappointing bout. And the consistency is very, very worrying from all of those players, no doubt about it.
And it really opened things up in that, you know, half of the draw. I think it gave Fritz a really good run to the quarters. He hardly had to face seeded players within that run. Obviously opened the door for somebody like a Ben Shelton to make a semifinal in the impressive way that he did. You know, and I think it gave some opportunities for American tennis. That was awesome. But I think, you know, we don't want to see the draw be blown wide open like that early on in a slam, especially when you have Djokovic on that half of the draw. It just felt like that really, made things a little less complicated for him. But the jury match, you know, the road to the final looked pretty simple. So we want to see a competitive level from those guys asking the questions in the early rounds and having deep runs, because you know, it was fantastic to see you know, 3 out of the 4 women making the semifinal, top 10 ranked players, and Madison Keys is knocking on the door of the top 10. So we want to make sure that that's what we're seeing on the men's side as well. Yeah.
And I think the women's side is actually fantastic. 7 of the top 8 players have made a major final this year. It was only, I believe, I think Jessica Pegula, I think Sabalenka made it twice, so that was unable to happen. But Pegula still hasn't. But she won in Canada, I believe, against Samsonova. I think she's proven that she deserves to be where she is as well. So I mean, at the top of the game on the women's side, I think it's proven to be more consistent at the moment than most of the top 10. The men's side doesn't stand the same weight for players like Medvedev, Alcaraz, and Djokovic, but for Rune, Ruud, Tsitsipas, it's hard to know where to rank those guys. Which let's get into power rankings. And now we have the power ranking segment, which we do weekly, and it's basically which players we think are performing the best at the moment. So these are the players we feel have done the best in the recent weeks. For this week, obviously, the U.S. Open plays a big factor as to that. And so we actually for the green plus signs, that means that the player moved up. For the red minuses, that means they moved down. If a player wasn't on our power rankings, then we added them in. We give them the blue plus mark, and then if the player stays the same, it's a blue minus. But yeah, basically we update this weekly for the players that we feel are doing the best at this moment in time. And yeah, a big factor on this is going to be the U.S. Open. So let's go to the first spot first. So I had Djokovic. We both had Djokovic taking it. We had Coco Gauff, both the U.S. Open champions. And the reason that I put Djokovic and Gauff is because of the U.S. Open victory. But for Coco, it's also because of the fact that she just won Washington. She just won in Cincinnati as well. And maybe if she didn't do that, I don't know if her consistency throughout this whole season has been there, but the fact that she's done so well in the recent weeks and now has just landed the U.S. Open, I felt like I just had to give it her. She's playing absolutely phenomenal at the moment, and coming into the next tournament, she's the player right now who I think is the player right now, and that's why I have her number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's 16-1 in her last matches, so she is the most consistent player at the moment through that summer hard court swing. Obviously Sabalenka took the number 1 spot today in the actual rankings. But I think, as you said, the first half of the season wasn't as consistent for Gauff, but the most recent story tells a different picture. And so, that's why I think she deserves to be in that number 1 spot at the moment.
Yeah. Cool. And then, then we have the same number 2 as well. Alcaraz and Sabalenka, and then I put Swiatek for number 4. You put Muchova for number 3. Why'd you have Muchova so high up? I am interested by that pick. Or Swiatek.
I think Muchova obviously had an impressive run to the finals at the French Open. Showed some really good tennis. Played great tennis again at Wimbledon, and also made the final in Cincinnati in the run-up to the US Open. So I think, she's a name that's been kind of consistently in the mix, and also had a really good semifinal run here at the US Open. Beat a tricky player in Cristea in the quarters. And again was in that quarter with Gauff where there could have been tricky questions to be asked from Swiatek and Rybakina, and she didn't get distracted by those guys losing early, and really kind of stuck to the course and brought some very good variety to her tennis. And I think she's demonstrating that she's dealt with some of those injury issues and has been a consistent threat since the French Open.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Yeah, I had Muchova as much as number 4. I still had Swiatek just a little bit above, but I do like that pick because she has been a very consistent force. Masters final, 2 major semifinals, a major final as well. And she's been good across the surfaces, across clay, and then hard courts. And I think she's a good pick. I guess going into the next tournament, I guess I'd probably still have more faith in Iga at the moment, just because she's been such consistent for us. But I completely understand the pick as well. She's been very strong. And then Jessie Pegula for number 5, and then Vondrousova. We both had the same picks. Jessica Pegula, she lost to an absolutely blazing hot Madison Keys in the U.S. Open, and that's, I think that speaks for itself. I think it was the round of 16 where Pegula lost, and I think that Keys was playing just such a strong level. She nearly made the final of this tournament. Sabalenka had an incredible comeback in their semifinal. But Keys was just plastering winners everywhere, and Pegula couldn't do much to hurt Keys when she was playing at that high of a level and that consistent kind of aggression, especially off the forehand. So I feel like Pegula still deserves that spot.
I agree. I think she's been up and around it. She's having a tough time at the slams. I dare ask the question of, are you playing too many competitions? Singles, mixed doubles, and doubles, all of which she, made deep runs in, and that's a tough ask at this level. And and then you face a tricky opponent who is playing hot tennis, and she's had no answer for it. But she's been up and around it and deserves to kind of be in that top 5 this year. I think what's interesting is kind of seeing from the 4th position onwards, you and I don't agree on anything on the ATP side. I think that's what you said earlier of like, I picking the top 5 onwards from the ATP is tricky right now. Where does Zverev sit compared to Sinner? Does that Sinner loss, like how much emphasis or weight do we put on that? Obviously, Zverev didn't seem to trouble Medvedev much at all, but he also looked spent from that, epic.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Rublev, I had not included in my top 10 before because I was just feeling a little negative about him. But again, he's showing why he consistently makes the quarters, why his ranking is what it is. And then we have so many question marks over like who fills in the remaining, 6 through 10 spot.
It's just players that might not even be top 10, but just players that seem to be playing well at the moment. Like I had Demonor, you had a guy like Ben Shelton who just made the semis, Tommy Paul. I mean, on the men's side, we had the exact same top 3, Djokovic, Alcaraz, Medvedev. I don't know how you could have a different one, to be honest. But then I had Sinner, who I'm still excited off of Canada, and I think Zverev played a good match in the 4th round. Sinner started cramping, which is still minus on Sinner, that he wasn't physically in it. But I think that I still give him. I think he's had a fantastic season, showing that for me, he's a top 4 player still in terms of my belief in him at the moment, because of Wimbledon semis, because of Canada because of three consecutive Masters semifinals at the start of the year through other consistent results. But I was thinking about Zverev as well because he won a title at the German Open a few weeks ago, and he's been playing only better and better, looking close to his old self, playing much more aggressively as well, but still the same kind of baseline game, but still very strong. And then Tiafoe number 7. I had Tommy Paul at number 7 just because Tommy Paul has been such a good player on hard courts all year this year, and he lost the 4th round to I forgot who he lost the 4th round to. Tom Paul, Ben Shelton. Yeah, that's right.
I think it's good to see a couple American names up in there, Paul and Fritz and Tiafoe. I think we've all included. I also pushed up Shelton. Super interesting season. Had a good run to the quarters at the Australian Open, then couldn't put back 2 back-to-back match wins together between the Australian Open and the US Open. And I think part of that is also he is a complete novice to the tour, coming through the collegiate system. He didn't have a passport until he turned pro, traveling the world for the first time, playing on clay and grass for the first time. I think it's kind of understandable why he feels most at home and most comfortable on the hard courts, and why he was able to put a good run together at the US Open. He has a serve like a beast, and he is a tricky lefty in that sense. So I think he will maybe not be a name to bet on in terms of like being super consistent, but I think as long as we're talking about hard courts and matches on hard courts, he's going to be somebody that you wouldn't really want to see in your half of the draw. Just because of the weapons that he does possess, and when he's feeling motivated and energized by the crowd, he I think is going to be a name that will take advantage of being inside the top 20 now, and I think has made the most of his summer.
Yeah, it's definitely fair. I loves a big match, loves a big crowd. Kind of I would compare it to like a Stanislav Wawrinka type of guy who really likes playing against the big guys and really shows up in the big matches. Likes using a crowd. Did you have any thoughts on Shelton's celebration, then Djokovic using it right back at him in that semifinal?
Yeah, when I initially saw it, I thought, geez, Shelton is 20 years old. It's his home slam. It's his best slam run ever. Clearly that celebration had ties to his collegiate background. I think one of his track friends had done it first.
Yes.
And was, kind of a reference to his Gator family and kind of everything going on with that. And it was his way of playing to the crowd, and it was fun and different. And so I was like, geez, Djokovic, why can't you let this kid have one thing? And something made me feel like Djokovic was pissed off throughout this whole match. Maybe Shelton didn't come in showing him the respect that Djokovic would want. I think in the press conference afterwards, Shelton kind of, he's like, I approached this match like anybody else. I didn't think about it as Novak Djokovic, and was saying things in the match like, oh, he didn't like that or whatever. He's loud, he's enthusiastic, he gets the crowd involved. He's kind of like a curious in that sense. And I just kind of felt like from Djokovic's end, like, why can't you let the kid have his thing, like have his celebration, and it's his best run to a semifinal. Like, do you really need to do all that? But then I also see the flip side of the argument of people being like, he won, he can do whatever he wants in that situation. I think some commentators were saying, it's good to kind of see a little angst, little rivalry, little, passive aggressive nature to our sport. And we want to see rivalries between the old dog and young players coming up. And I think that, the handshake at the net just kind of showed how frosty things were and how Shelton, maybe doesn't give a F in terms of, who Djokovic is, and is going to try and play and impose his will however he pleases. But I loved his answer in the press conference afterwards of imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, because I thought he had the last laugh.
Amazing to say that to a player who's won now 24 Grand Slam titles. Just the fearlessness that Shelton shows. I think he's a fearless guy. He likes it, that fearlessness allows him to play into a crowd. He had zero nerves coming into the Novak match. It looked like he was actually having a ton of fun with the situation. Novak maybe felt like I think the flip side of it for me is that the crowd, there's like, I think at one point a 45-second pause of like crowd applause after Novak hit a fault, and I felt like Shelton didn't do anything to kind of discern the crowd a bit and kind of was playing more to it. So I felt like that was the frustration that Novak had. But obviously playing the celebration of Shelton, aside from maybe the kind of entertaining rivalry bit of it, it's hard to really defend as something that's actually good to do, or something that's not a little bit personal and a little bit kind of young guy coming in and kind of that kind of reaction. So, but it was definitely, it made a lot of headlines, and that was a crazy kind of thing that happened, I felt like.
I agree.
And then real quickly we can kind of cap this off. I had Demon because I felt like he played great in this tournament. Also took the first set off of Medi, completely dismantled Jari, who's also been having a good season. Took out took the first set over Medi. I just feel like he's been playing a very consistent high level ball. I had Taylor Fritz and Tiafoe coming into my power rankings, because Taylor Fritz, even though he had a very easy draw, he lost, I think, 13 games in his first 3 matches. Like, he was playing a really high level. I actually felt like the worst match he played was against Djokovic. That might have been partly because of who he played, but I think that also he just really didn't show up in that match the way that he would have wanted to. And then Francis Tiafoe I had coming in too, making a quarterfinal, and he's played a good ball this season. I felt like he deserves to be in the top 10 the power rankings.
I think the other name to point out here that we've both pushed up a little bit is Vondrousova, the Wimbledon champion.
Yes.
It's historically, we've not seen on the women's side a winner from Wimbledon coming in and having a really strong year at the US Open in quite some time. And for her to kind of deal with that pressure, newly ranked inside the top 10, and make a good go of it. I think she reached the quarters. So I think she shows that she's a player that's deserving of that top 10 ranking, deserving of the Wimbledon title. Certainly has the skill set and the ability to cause problems at all of these big tournaments, and has dealt with the pressure incredibly well. So really, it's just going to be a question of if her body is able to stay healthy this time around, similar to kind of Mukova in that way. But I was very impressed by her ability to quietly have a good run here at the US Open.
Yeah, I think she's proven the consistency factor. She won, I think 11 straight matches at the majors. I think she's proven that she's a very tough player, very crafty as well. And she's had some health concerns, like you mentioned, but I think if she stays healthy, she's going to be a tough threat. And then that wraps up kind of the power rankings. Obviously, the U.S. Open champions come out first, but then. The top 10 on the women's, we had pretty similar. Top 10 on the men's kind of got away from us. A lot of differences there. Then we can talk about upcoming tournaments. We got Laver Cup coming out, which is where Federer retired last year. He'll be back for kind of a 1-year anniversary of him being gone, but also a lot of other great players in the mix.
The teams should be pretty interesting. Honestly, it's a fun format. It's a team format of tennis, which we don't get to see too often. It's nice to see Ben Shelton's going to be in that mix. I think he was talking about how that's the kind of team format that he's used to from college tennis. So again, that was a reason for me for pushing him a little higher inside the top 10, because I think he might thrive under that type of environment. And this is it's a fun approach to tennis. It's a little different, but it's great to see some big names included in the Laver Cup. And I think we should all look forward to a fun little weekend of tennis towards the end of this month.
Talk about Frenchman Gael Monfils as well in there. He likes the crowd too. He's been playing a high level ball as well. And then also WTA in San Diego. That started today. We had Bencic in the mix, Pliskova in the mix. They were a couple of the players playing today. To be a good tournament. Then also Davis Cup, and then also Chengdu and Zhuhai as well. Davis Cup, Alcaraz was originally going to play. He pulled out. Ramos Vinolas took his place, but Djokovic is still in the mix for now, coming off a US Open.
Yeah, that's right. So I think we got a couple of good names in the hats for Chengdu and Zhuhai. So we'll kind of see how those two tournaments unfold. Obviously, the guys and the women are still kind of going to be competing now over the next 2 months for places in those year-end finals in October, November time. So it's going to be kind of a mad dash between now and then to see who is going to make the cut for both of those finals tournaments. And they'll be looking to take advantage of these tournaments over the next couple of weeks to do so.
Yeah. And some of the events are back in China, like Shanghai, which is coming up later, as well as some of these other tournaments as well. So that is a thing as
Yeah.
well to expect.
So in our final segment, we usually talk about culture as it relates to tennis, and we've obviously been talking a lot today about the US Open, so don't want to talk everybody's ear off, but just kind of rounding things off with the fact that we saw record attendance this year at the US Open. Nearly 1 million fans came through the door to watch tennis, which is phenomenal for the sport, given that it's been in a position where a lot of brands have been pointing fingers at tennis as like a fuddy-duddy old person sport that people aren't interested in anymore. And if there isn't any Federer and there isn't any Nadal, nobody wants anything to do with it. Well, here is evidence of otherwise. No Serena, no Federer, no Nadal. And here we have record attendance at a US Open. I think it's just testament to the fact that we have a lot of new players in the game who are telling great stories for themselves, representing their country, representing different styles of play, making things interesting and unique in the sense of like the sport isn't quite as predictable as it used to be. Obviously, Djokovic is still in the mix, but perhaps bringing a little bit more focus and attention to the fact that we aren't starting each of these slams with exactly the same names in our mouths as we have for the last 20 years. And shows that interest in tennis is peaking again. More people are playing as a result of COVID, and it's great to see that trajectory is going upwards. And hopefully, we'll see that translate not just into the other slams, but also the other tournaments that kind of are in the lead up to all of these slams events. That more and more fans will look for opportunities to get connected with the sport and be able to come out and watch on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, I think I didn't know the nearly 1 million, but that's super exciting to hear. And I think you mentioned new players. I mean, you hear all the time Alcaraz is becoming a mainstream name in sports. I think also a player like Ben Shelton, who's also 20 years old, a player like Coco Gauff, she's not even 20 years old yet. And a lot of these new names are coming into the sport who are very exciting for the sport and bringing a lot of people to watch still, even with, like you said, with Serena gone, with Fed gone, with Rafa gone. I think that's very encouraging. And yeah, I mean, I've seen things like people saying like that pickleball is becoming popular now. Nobody's going to pay attention to tennis. I think it's worth it to mention that there's something special about tennis, the kind of physical battle that tennis brings, and the kind of the U.S. Open atmosphere of watching just two players head one-on-one in this kind of physical battle. Mental game, just there's something about tennis that's special and very exciting in its own right and very different. I think that's really shined through, and it shines throughout the US Open, especially with the crazy atmosphere that it provides. It really enhances this game to something really, really special.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, one can laugh about it, but the number of celebrities in attendance over the last 2 weeks has also been really cool. And a number of those celebrities being athletes from other sports. And I think that's what's fantastic is like a Jimmy Butler turning up and kind of helping people from the basketball NBA side of things have a look to tennis and kind of understand like, hey, like these are guys with similar skill sets and athleticism as us, and maybe tennis wasn't a part of their culture or accessibility growing up, but that doesn't mean that we can't kind of have interests and mutual interests across the big sports in the US. And I think having those types of names involved attending on such a consistent basis is huge for our sport. And even seeing some of the non-athletic celebrity names who are big in our culture, Kylie Jenner, Timothy Chalamet, Kendall Jenner's there. I think we saw some of the Logan brothers. We see huge names.
Matthew McConaughey there, Novak quick to hug him in his box.
I mean, that's incredible. It just shows that, these people, I know it's the biggest match or tournament of the year, and these celebrities have the chance to turn out, but it shows that they still want to be a part of that culture, that it's not just sitting courtside at an NBA final or sitting in a suite at the Super Bowl where these celebrities want to be spotted. Tennis is a sport where they want to be. And I think that is, huge in terms of helping our sport continue to grow, to attract attention from younger generations.
Yeah, having all the athletes and the celebrity shot. I think other athletes understand what makes tennis so exciting, what makes it such a difficult sport, because like you said, I think they see a lot of tennis in their own sports. I think the more that we talk about the difficulties of tennis, but also how rewarding it is of a sport, how exciting it is of a sport, even if it's maybe kind of a harder sell than football or basketball, where there's so much going on at one time, where you have to kind of look
Mhm.
deep as to what makes it so tough, what makes it so exciting. I think the athletes understand. I think it's great that they're really showing up for the sport.
Yeah, yeah, it's changing the trajectory of things. I think a brand like Nike has looked at tennis and relegated it to a second tier of sports that they don't prioritize in the same way. And I think seeing again, like players like a Tiafo coming out with such a unique look, Ben Shelton wearing on in this kind of like Barbie Oppenheimer outfit that he had going on, I think them being able to show their style, have a different energy, a different approach is so captivating. And I think we'll ask the questions of bigger brands like Nike in terms of if they're going to come back to the table and do their part in really accelerating the game. They gave Sabalenka her first custom outfit, which was like, finally, she deserved that so much. The last thing I want to touch on in that bucket as well is seeing that many Black Americans and Black players perform as well as they did. Tennis is typically a white privileged sport, and to have those types of stories be threaded through on both the men's and the women's side, I think shows that the sport is expanding its reach and its accessibility for new storylines, new players from different backgrounds and upbringings having an opportunity to play and really being able to make an impact. So again, expanding the reach and making sure that it's something that's accessible to all of us.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is Serena and Venus coming from such a difficult background, um, and then getting to the place that they were and getting to such mainstream stardom, becoming some of the best athletes of all time.
Yeah.
Particularly Serena getting to a complete insane level of stardom. It's very impressive what both them did, and I think that's really great to see. And I hope that keeps on going. Absolutely.
I think the USTA and their leadership team has done a fantastic job of promoting the sport, thinking about other elements that are attractive, on the side of it, from the honeydews to all the activations and events that happen to coincide with the US Open. So many things going on in New York City itself that bring people into the fold of tennis and show that, if you put the energy and effort and investment into the game, and activating the fans, that they will come. And so hopefully that motivates other tournaments or the other Grand Slams to have a similar approach, to provide similar opportunities for things like Kids Day, and really do their part in expanding the reach of tennis.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's been a great event. I heard I believe it was I was watching the women's doubles, and I believe it was Vonareva who's been at the tournament for a long time. She said this is the best U.S. Open she's ever been a part of, and they're making it much more accessible. And
Yeah.
she mentioned the Kids Day as well, and that there are a lot of kids showing up, and that's kind of a big reason to do tennis. And hopefully, you got a lot more people involved in the sport. This has been Tennis 360. I've been Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
I appreciate you guys for watching. Definitely tune in for next week. And make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. We'll be here for more podcasts, more content down the road. We'll also be doing live streams for tournaments down the road as well. So thank you everybody who subscribed during the US Open run. It was crazy, but we got a lot more coming. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching.
Bye, guys.